discuss a matter of urgent public importance. Written notice has been given to your Honor's office, and the question to be brought before the Assembly would be the final communique of June 9th, 1990 for the First Minister's meeting on the Constitution.
Member for Edmonton Glengarry.
Speaker, I rise to give notice that under Standing Order 40, tomorrow I will rise at the end of question period to seek unanimous consent to consider a motion to have motion number 296 dealing with constitutional reform moved to the top of the order paper.
Introduction of bills. Tabling returns and reports.
The Honourable Associate Minister of Family and Social Services.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to file with the Assembly 4 copies of my reply to the written question number 257.
Attorney General. Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to table 4 copies of the signed final communique dated June 9th, 1990, the First Minister's meeting on the Constitution. Copies will be made available to every member.
The Attorney General.
I'd like to file with the Assembly the annual report, March 31st, 1989, for the Crimes Compensation Board.
Member for Edmonton Glengarry.
Speaker, I wish to table proposals for future constitutional discussions made up by the Alberta Liberal Caucus.
Introduction of special guests.
Minister of Education, followed by Public Works Supply and Services.
Mr. Speaker, this week is National Access Awareness Week in Canada, an opportunity for all of us in Alberta to celebrate our achievements in improving access to transportation, housing, education, recreation, and employment for people with disabilities. The organizers of the Alberta Committee overseeing our activities in the province, Mr. Speaker, are in the gallery today, and I am proud to introduce them. Even more proud, sir, because of the kickoff breakfast this morning where it was acknowledged that the vision put forward by the Premier's Council on the status of persons with disabilities, a vision which was endorsed last year by Premier Getty and our government, as well as the Council's action plan. These were recognized as proof positive of our government's commitment to persons of all abilities in Alberta. The members of the organizing committee are in the gallery today. They are Chairman Iris Saunders, Vice Chairman Penny Ullman, Provincial Coordinator Janice Iadkow, and Darryl Rock, the Assistant National Coordinator. I would ask all members of the Assembly to give them a very warm welcome, Mr. Speaker.
Public Works Supply and Services.
Here in the members gallery today are 32 young people from Fort Assiniboine School located in Fort Assiniboine. Mr. Speaker, they come from 2 classes, one a grade 6 class and the other a grade 10 class. The young people are accompanied by 2 teachers, Mrs. Donna Pekanik and Mrs. Tanya Borg, and also accompanied by their bus driver, Mr. Ed Litke. Mr. Speaker, I'd ask our young people to rise and receive the warm welcome to the Legislative Assembly.
Member for Edmonton Glengarry, followed by Three Hills.
Speaker, I wish to introduce to you and to members of this Assembly 24 members of the Major General Griesbaugh School who are accompanied by their teacher, Brenda Downey, and one of the parents, Mrs. Martin. I would ask that they stand and receive the welcome of this Assembly.
There they are.
Three Hills, followed by Drumheller.
Mr. Speaker, it's my privilege today to introduce 12 students. In their first visit to the Alberta Legislature, they attend the Meadowbrook School in Airdrie. They are accompanied by their teacher, Pat Beingessner, And aide, a very appropriate name that Josephine has, Josephine Meach. I'm very pleased to see them in the members gallery today. Would they rise and accept the warm welcome of the House?
Drumheller.
Mr. Speaker, it is my pleasure today to introduce to you and through you to all members of the Assembly 9 members of the Drumheller Seniors Recreational Group who live in and around the city of Drumheller, and they're here to visit our legislature today. I'd ask them to rise and receive the traditional warm welcome of the Assembly.
Additional.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, it seems like a long time ago that we were here, but I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, we're all meeched out, but I guess we're going to have to continue for a while. Mr. Speaker, the Premier spent last week in Ottawa with other First Ministers on the Meech Lake constitutional amendments. I was there along with the leader of the Liberal Party, but like the rest of Canadians, Mr. Speaker, we were on the outside trying to figure out what was going on, Mr. Speaker. I think we both commented about one of the signs out there, more original signs of the people going in. I'm sure the Premier saw it, where the sign said, "I'm confused," Mr. Speaker, and I think that was true of many Canadians. Now, Mr. Speaker, I blame, frankly, the Prime Minister of this country for the situation. The constitutional talks being done like labor negotiations, Mr. Speaker, if you like politics by exhaustion. It's unacceptable, and I think the Premier would agree with me that this process was bad. And as a result, what's unfortunate is that there's probably more intolerance across the country. I know Albertans are confused and angry. But my question flowing then to the Premier, Mr. Speaker, is what concrete plans does the Premier have now to tell Albertans how and why the First Ministers made the decision they did, what the agreement means, and bring Albertans into the constitutional picture?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I gather the Government House Leader has introduced a motion for suspend the regular business of the House and get into urgent public debate on this agreement, and that we will be able to, if you agree to the urgency of the matter, Mr. Speaker, we'll do it today. And I would propose to speak to that matter. I would ask the Leader of the Opposition to speak to it, and the Leader of the Liberal Party as well, and any other members who would like to participate. And I would hope through that debate we can provide some considerable insight into not just the process, but the conclusion, Mr. Speaker, so that Albertans will know and members of the House will know. And then we can assess, Mr. Speaker, should there be more time, more in the legislature, or perhaps by some other means, communicating with the people of Alberta, we will follow up in that regard as well.
Well, Mr. Speaker, appreciate if that debate comes. I will participate, Mr. Speaker, but the calls that we are getting today, and I'm sure the Premier's office is getting, is that there is a great deal of confusion and anger. I think mainly directed at the process, because people aren't aware necessarily what's in it. Now, Mr. Speaker, when the Meech Lake Amendment came to this province for ratification in 1987, the New Democrats held a series of public hearings on Meech Lake in 1987 because we felt so strongly about the principle of public involvement. It was, if I may say so to the Premier, it was one of the amendments that we brought forward that this government defeated at the time, Mr. Speaker. We suggested that hearings be mandatory before the province of Alberta agreed or disagreed with constitutional changes. Now, my question to the Premier flowing from this, now that I'm sure he's seen firsthand the results of insufficient public involvement in constitutional matters, can the Premier tell us how he plans to ensure that Albertans will not be on the outside again in any future events?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I agree with the Honourable Leader of the Opposition that the process does need to be changed. And, but I will draw his attention back to the original Meech Lake proposal going through this House. We had public meetings. The government members went back and held public meetings while the resolution sat on the order paper here for some 6 months, and we had public meetings with our various constituencies, and then came back and brought that input to the legislature. And of course, as you know, Mr. Speaker, the resolution was approved unanimously by the House. Nevertheless, I agree with the Leader of the Opposition, and I think all of my colleagues do, and I would draw attention, I don't want to jump the debate if you like, but I tabled today the document in which the Premiers agreed to now review the entire process of amending the Constitution, including that 3-year time limit, which is the period in which you allow where governments may change, Premiers may change, and therefore you can have a problem of actually having a resolution move, and the question of mandatory public hearings. So I think, Mr. Speaker, the change is coming because we all agree the process should be changed.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate knowing what's in the document, Mr. Speaker, that the public is going to force politicians into this. And I'm sure the politicians don't want to go through this again either, Mr. Speaker. But one of the major flaws with Meech is that when they said they had the deal, closed doors again, that nothing could be changed, not one dotted I or one crossed T. And so the public hearings that people had were irrelevant because nobody was going to change, Mr. Speaker. That's the problem, as I see it, Mr. Speaker. My question flowing from there, would the Premier guarantee that at least provincially, that any future constitutional change, there will be public hearings in the province before, and this is the key point, before the government agrees to any amendments to the Constitution?
Mr. Speaker, I can't guarantee future governments of the province of Alberta at all. As I said, the complete amending formula is going to be reviewed, and also the question of mandatory public hearings. There was national public hearings, of course, the House of Commons, and while the honourable member says that you couldn't change anything in the resolution, that is true. But I think it's fair to say that the meetings with Albertans, discussions with Albertans, discussions in other provinces have led to the additions that are in this document that I tabled today. While the Meech Lake is proceeding as is, nevertheless there is additional constitutional add-ons now in the document agreed to by all the premiers, and also means of dealing with future constitutional issues.
Second main question, Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, back to the Premier, I'd point out that you could bring in a law, as they do in Manitoba, that would accomplishes this for the next provincial government. But, Mr. Speaker, also the Premier, in the sum up on Saturday morning in Ottawa, I believe it was about 1 o'clock that he was talking, I heard him talk about the future, and specifically young people, Mr. Speaker. And this morning, Mr. Speaker, I announced that the New Democrat official opposition will conduct a province-wide task force to look at the future for children in Alberta. Mr. Speaker, we know that there are serious problems, and we also know that there are some creative solutions to these problems, just waiting for a government with enough political will to ensure that these children have a chance for a healthy future in this province, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, so we can do some concrete things to talk about that future that the Premier was talking about, Mr. Speaker, and I want to ask the Premier, who talks a lot about the family, Mr. Speaker, this question. If he is committed to ending the conditions that cause so many Alberta children to live in poverty, how does he justify holding out on increases in shelter allowances that are so desperately needed?
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is something that the Minister of Family and Social Services has been dealing with, and I'd ask him to respond to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, again, we've said on many occasions in this Assembly that this province is committed to addressing the social needs of Alberta, and particularly children. I think it's important that we try to keep things in perspective, though, Mr. Speaker, when we talk about poverty lines. As an example, what we're talking about, at least the last definition that I saw, was families that are spending more than 58.5% of their income on food, shelter, and clothing. And, of course, that very definition includes a lot of Albertans. But having said that, Mr. Speaker, I want to reiterate that, again, here in our province, our rate of those below the poverty line is amongst the lowest in Canada, and I think that's a tribute to the good things that we as a government are doing already. But we're not satisfied to sit back on our past accomplishments, Mr. Speaker. We're committed to future reforms. And if I look down this row, Mr. Speaker, and the row behind me and the row behind them and my members opposite, I think they could all talk about initiatives that we as a government have introduced. I look at the provincial treasurer, who has taken some 250,000 low-income Albertans off our tax rolls. I look at the Minister of Education and some of the initiatives that he's taken, and we recognize that education is an important component to addressing poverty. I look at the initiatives of the Minister of Career Development and Employment and some of the things he's doing.
That's a pretty good list so far. Thank you. Supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I thought I asked about shelter allowances, Mr.
Here,
Speaker.
here.
Mr. Speaker, I've heard this drivel from this minister before. And we hear the Premier talking about the future, Mr. Speaker, about young people. I'm talking the fact that in Alberta, 1 in 6 children lives below the poverty level. And I'm telling you right now, telling you right now that 70,000 children living in poverty right now in Alberta live in families trying to get by family on social allowances. That's the reality. And to the minister, doesn't the minister and the Premier, or whoever wants to answer it, realize that by a stroke of a pen, you could help out these 70,000 people right now?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is trying to take a very simple approach to a very complex problem. And he knows full well that this is a problem that's being faced right across this nation. And again, we've said on many occasions in this Assembly that we're not happy to see it. But to suggest that we're doing nothing, Mr. Speaker, is not right. Again, I would remind the Leader of the Opposition that for the third consecutive month, we've seen our caseload numbers dropping, that here in Alberta we have amongst the lowest unemployment in the nation, that we have more jobs, Mr. Speaker, in our province today than we've ever had in the history of this province. And that's a tribute to the initiatives of this government, of our Premier, who has said that diversification is important, and it's happening in this province. Mr. Speaker, we're committed. We're committed to working towards real, meaningful solutions. We're committed to social reform. And we will be bringing forward initiatives there, Mr. Speaker, just as quickly as we can. But again, Mr. Speaker, I want to emphasize that I'm not going to allow the integrity of these reforms to be compromised by rushing them through without adequate consultation. And it's interesting, again, Mr. Speaker, to listen to the Leader of the Opposition call for a need for more consultation. I'm doing that, Mr. Speaker. This government's doing that right now as it relates to social reforms, because we believe that by working with Albertans, by working together, by working with our federal counterparts, we'll come up with some answers.
Mr. Speaker, this minister can stand up and say that he's going to consult, and the point that I'm making is 1 in 6 children are suffering from poverty. They're not doing well in school. They're not doing well in school. They're not getting proper food or nutrition. And there's going to be problems later on in the future. You don't need to study that forever. Sure, there are broad problems. That's why we talk about fair taxation and equal pay for work of equal value. But I'm asking this minister, he could do something concrete right now. I'm going to ask him, what's it going to take? How much longer before he moves on this very important issue?
Mr. Speaker, we are moving on this important issue right now. We've done some very progressive things in this province. Our child welfare legislation is amongst the most progressive in the nation. Mr. Speaker, we're looking at some of the adjustments that we can make. But again, I want to remind the Leader that our caseloads are dropping as it relates to income security. Our caseloads are dropping as it relates to children under our care. And it's a result, Mr. Speaker, and a tribute not just to government, because this government realizes that we alone cannot provide the solutions or the answers to this societal problem. It's a tribute, Mr. Speaker, to Albertans. It's a tribute, Mr. Speaker, to the many agencies across this province that are working with Albertans towards meaningful resolution. It's a tribute, Mr. Speaker, to the cooperation that we're receiving on the national level and the efforts that they're making there as well. Mr. Speaker, I can only again say that we take no pride, we sense no comfort in seeing the kinds of statistics that the leader is talking about. We know that poverty is a real problem in our nation today. Again, I can only say that we're committed to doing what we can. We're committed to working with Albertans and Canadians, and hopefully, by working together, we'll continue to make progress as we have in the past.
Edmonton Glengarry.
Mr. Speaker, as I sat with the leader of the NDP party in the wee hours of Saturday and into Sunday morning, listening to the premiers sum up their respective positions, one issue became crystal clear, and that is that the process of constitutional change is wrong and that it needs to be amended, changed. The Honourable Premier has referred to a section in the accord that was signed this weekend that calls for mandatory public involvement. I think it's time for Alberta and this Assembly to get on the record, to clearly state that public input is mandatory, is essential. You can't change constitutions, you can't make constitutions without input from the people. So my first question to the Premier is this. Given the statements that have been made by all of the premiers, given the fact that the accord calls for mandatory public input, will the Honourable Premier agree that standing orders be changed so as to allow for mandatory public review before and after constitutional changes are proposed?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've drawn attention to the honourable member that the entire amending process is going to be reviewed. And I would certainly give consideration, as a result of that review, to changes to the Alberta legislature's own rules and proceedings. But I think we should carry out the review, obviously, to make sure that changes are the best possible.
Mr. Speaker, it seems to me that in my experience in Ottawa, that the Quebec delegation had a tremendous advantage over other provinces. They appeared better prepared. The people in their province were better informed. The whole process was one which all of Quebecers were involved in, and I think they, because of that, got more out of the process in this meeting and last meeting. I wonder if the Honourable Premier would agree to this. Would the Honourable Premier agree to establishing a special standing committee of this legislature to be both proactive and reactive in establishing the constitutional needs for Albertans, in allowing the government of Alberta to go to those constitutional meetings better prepared, better able to identify the needs and words of Albertans?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I said, the whole amending process is being reviewed, and we'll consider whatever comes out of that review. But let me first, without putting down another province's capacity nor their ability to prepare, the Quebec delegation didn't come close to the delegation that represented Alberta at this constitutional meeting. Our Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, our Minister of Municipal Affairs, who were with me, and the members of the Attorney General's Department and members of who we have as consultants, such as Dr. Peter Meekison and the members of the Alberta Federal and Intergovernmental Affairs Department, I think we're part of a delegation that was head and shoulders above any delegation in Ottawa at this meeting. And I would tell the honourable member, because I know that's his first visit to one of these meetings, that it is recognized across our province and in the federal government that the Alberta constitutional preparations, the Alberta Senate reform knowledge, the committee that traveled the nation, all of these things have been leaders in Canada in this whole area of constitutional reform.
Mr. Speaker, I don't understand how the Honourable Premier can waffle on these issues. It seems to me that the experiences that the three of us had in Ottawa are clear that the process has to be changed. It has to be changed quickly. There is a process that starts on July the 15th. And to say, well, we'll discuss it and we'll consider it, it seems to me is just putting it off and again offending Albertans. We have to get the people of Alberta behind this constitutional process. My last question to the Premier is this. Would the Premier agree to allowing a special standing committee of the legislature to start working on the strategy, working on the matters that should be included, specifically included, to bring forward and to bring about Senate reform so that we can start from the 15th of July and know that we can succeed?
Hear, hear. Frankly, Mr. Speaker, I must caution the honourable member that Alberta is succeeding, and succeeding dramatically. And I told him we're going to review the process and then make, after the review, the changes that are necessary. There's no waffling on that issue. And I also tell the honourable member, if he wishes to propose to this Assembly a new standing committee of this Assembly, then he should propose it. There are ways to do that, and let the House deal with it.
Rocky Mountain House.
Mr. Speaker, last week there was a major sweet oil spill northwest of Rocky Mountain House. Now, I understand that the Minister of Energy has been out there. I also understand that the oil is contained so that there won't be any getting into the North Saskatchewan River, thereby even possibly making a problem for the city of Edmonton. To the Minister of Energy, has it been determined if all of the regulations governing pipelines in this province have been followed?
Mr. Speaker, I did have the opportunity to this morning inspect the oil spill on the tributary flowing into Buster Creek in the Rocky Mountain House area. I should also point out to the honourable member that on the weekend I had an opportunity to discuss this matter with the chairman of the Energy Resources Conservation Board, together with Senior Vice President Mr. Cheryl Moore of Amoco. Mr. Speaker, I did inspect the site, and I have been assured to date that the oil spill in the tributary will not seep into the Buster Creek, which feeds into the North Saskatchewan River. I'm pleased with the job they've done to date, and with regard to the other issue the member mentions on the regulatory side, I guess there are a number of questions that must be answered. My first priority and my first instructions to the ERCB was to be sure that their first priority was to make sure that we contain this spill and keep it out of Buster Creek. Fortunately, Mr. Speaker, the weather conditions are working in our favor in that the water is running high and the oil is sweet and at the top of the water, and in that the muskeg bogs are saturated with water. They are not absorbing the oil. If conditions from a climate point of view were different, it would have a little different environmental impact. We will be reviewing and gathering information as we are now, Mr. Speaker, to determine whether or not there was a breach of the Pipeline Act and what recourse we have. To date, I do not have all that information, so I, at this point, cannot report specifically on that matter to the honourable member.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. It really concerns me how this volume of oil could possibly be escaping for those many days and still not be detected. To the Minister of Energy, do you see now any need for changing the monitoring of pipelines in the province?
Mr. Speaker, it is also part of the review that we will be doing in concert with the review of the Pipeline Act. There are, as I've indicated, a number of questions to be answered by the operator of the pipeline. Firstly, was it human error? Secondly, was it mechanical error? Was it a fault of the welds in the seams on the pipeline? And was it related, or was it related to the age of that pipeline? Amoco does flow balances, Mr. Speaker, in the pipelines on a daily basis, and as recently as May 31st did a flyover inspection of the Rangeland pipeline and its arteries, and reported no evidence. However, the spill did occur longer. It was the period of time between the detection and the time it should have been reported is longer than should have happened, and that is part of the review that the ERCB is conducting. I hope to be able to have that information as soon as possible. We will be reviewing trying to find out where we can lay blame for this tragedy, but as I indicated, first priority is to contain it and not allow it to spread any further and get into the major water tables. I'll report back to the honourable member as soon as I have that information, Mr. Speaker.
West Yellowhead.
Mr. Speaker, recently Albertans have become aware that there are serious problems in the trucking industry. They're responsible for hauling over 75% of all the freight in the province. And in their struggle to survive, Mr. Speaker, truckers have to haul too much, too long, for too little, possibly putting excess loads on the province's highways, jeopardizing their own health and safety, plus always facing the threat of bankruptcy. Can the minister, in his meetings with the independent operators tomorrow, agree to go beyond just hearing their concerns and be committed to setting up a public review process to examine the situation in all of Alberta?
Mr. Speaker, I met with the President and the Vice President of the newly formed organization this morning, Mr. Como and Mr. Berridge, I believe it is, and we went over a number of the concerns that they had, and I expressed to them a concern that a private businessman dealing with a private businessman was still something other than government, and that we probably would not interfere. And I asked them if they had at any time met with the owners or the companies, and they had not. They have tried to, but as a newly formed organization, they're just in the formative stage. So I suggested to them, number one, that was a must, that they had to do that, and that if they had some difficulties with that, and they gave me a list, that using my good offices, I would give them a call and ask them if they might get together with them, recognizing they may tell me where to go.
Mr. Speaker, Alberta highways are at risk because of these heavy weights on vehicles, and the public is at risk because of the risks of drivers are taking when they try to make their ends meet. Will the minister not take some steps to ensure that Alberta roads and all people, including the truckers, are protected?
Well, Mr. Speaker, just to correct that particular statement, there are standards that are in place for weight loads, there are safety standards in place, there are inspections that take place almost daily of the industry. If you might just give me the time, you asked the question, of the industry. And in this past year, the 1989 year, there were 17,500 inspections of those particular vehicles on the road, and if they do not meet those standards, they are pulled.
Member for West Loch Sturgeon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question today is to the Premier. Much has been written, Mr. Speaker, over the last week and spoken on what's going to happen to Senate reform, and which is a very key item that has to be settled if Western Canada is going to become a full partner in Confederation. The next is last year, Mr. Speaker, after a year of prodding by the Liberal opposition, the government did decide to hold an election for the Senate. Now, Mr. Speaker, since the Prime Minister, somebody's laughing, I guess he can't read, since the Prime Minister and members of the Federal Conservative Caucus have said their appointment was contingent upon the resolution of the Meech Lake impasse, an excuse that the government was content to live with, Mr. Speaker, despite the appointment of other unelected senators in the country, can the Premier now tell this House whether our Senate election winner will be appointed?
First of all, Mr. Speaker, I should point out to the House and the people of Alberta that the Liberal Party voted against the Senate Selection Act. And now I gather are strongly for it. So it's quite a reversal.
Can't make up their minds. Which way's the wind blowing?
So, Mr. Speaker, we do have an opportunity to, if you allow us to suspend normal business to debate this matter. I would like to provide the members with the results of some of my discussions on this matter.
Mr. Speaker, it's hard to imagine that our Premier spent a full week in Ottawa and didn't think of bringing up this issue. Did the Premier even maybe consider throwing a block on the Prime Minister when he got ready to leave until he made up his mind?
Well, as I said, Mr. Speaker, I did discuss the matter and would like to tell the House about those discussions.
Smoky River, followed by Edmonton Strathcona.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This past week, there's been letters to the editor criticizing the farm aid package throughout many of the rural agricultural papers. It indicated that the disaster aid program is in shambles, farmers are very upset and very unhappy, and so on, the usual doom and gloom. My question is to the Minister of Public Works, Supply and Services. Could you share with me and with the House how many applications have been processed to date and for what amount of money?
Give it to us, King.
Mr. Speaker, I noticed as well that there are some of these letters of doom and gloom that have been sent to to editors in various newspapers in northwestern Alberta. I should point out, I guess, that the author of the letters, in fact, is a member from Beggarville, and I was kind of disappointed that the things that he basically said in his letters, because unfortunately they're a fair great distance away from what would commonly be referred to as the truth, Mr. Speaker. When the announcement was made by the Premier in Sexsmith, Mr. Speaker, we talked about a program that would be available to farmers in northwestern Alberta that would be in the neighborhood, that would provide assistance in the neighborhood of $14.9 million. To date, Mr. Speaker, checks have been allocated and addressed to over 1,600 farmers, recipients, at a total support level from the province of Alberta at over $16 million, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My second question is also to the Minister of Public Works, Supply and Services. And could you expand upon that particular aspect of the program? I understand there is also a 2-year interest-free aspect to this program, loan interest-free. Could you give us some indication as to what the uptake has been on that particular program, please?
Mr. Speaker, this was a multi-fold disaster assistance program, and in addition to direct support that would be coming from Alberta Public Safety Services, from the Government of Alberta through Alberta Public Safety Services. Mr. Speaker, my two colleagues, the two Ministers of Agriculture, also were very, very much involved with assistance through the Agricultural Development Corporation. To date, I believe that there's some 120 farmers that received special disaster assistance loans that would provide for no interest for 2 years, Mr. Speaker, totaling over $3 million.
Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Federal and Intergovernmental Affairs. Back in March, the Minister was good enough to tell me that he would have his department look into the legal underpinnings for the assertion of the federal government that there was in fact a deadline of 3 years to the acceptance by everybody of the Meech Lake Accord, and he said he'd do that. And I wonder whether he is in a position now to assure the Assembly, Mr. Speaker, that, in the opinion of his department, that assertion of the federal government has a basis and is valid, despite what I would say many appearances to the contrary.
Speaker, I appreciate the honourable member's interest and concern in whether or not the 3-year deadline, in fact, is in place. It is our considered legal opinion and our advice that the 3-year deadline for ratification was not established by the political accord, but rather it was established by Section 39(2) of the Constitution Act of 1982, and that the only way to change that would be to begin the ratification process all over again, and that therefore would be very difficult, indeed impossible to do.
That's my point exactly, Mr. Speaker, because that section, Mr. Speaker, surely, the Minister will agree, was satisfied years ago when 2/3 of the provinces, comprising 50% of the population of Canada, assented to it. So I challenge the Minister
to file an opinion from his department or from anybody else showing that the deadline remains for the remaining 3 provinces.
And I would disagree with you.
Well, it is a question, of course, then, as to whether or not the agreement is severable. There has been, of course, some opinion to that effect that legally speaking it might be severable. But it is quite clearly the view, unanimously held, I think, and endorsed again today by the Premier of Newfoundland, that politically it would not be possible to sever the accord and therefore to bring into place certain of the amendments and or to change the deadline for ratification. Well, legal opinions are valuable instruments for governments to follow, but it, of course, has been long-standing rule that legal opinions are not tabled in the legislature. We have a remarkable difference today in the sense that the legal opinion attached to the accord arrived at last week is made available for consideration, but it's not the intention of the government to share legal opinions on this or any other matter which might come before the House. It's just not done.
Nor are legal opinions part of a question period. Edmonton Jasper, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My questions are also on the oil spill near Rocky Mountain House. On Friday, the Minister of Energy indicated that he's satisfied with the situation in which it's the responsibility of the pipeline operator to detect flow balances and determine leakages. What he did not say is the rules and procedures under which this takes place are in fact an industry document prepared by the Canadian Petroleum Association, recommended practice for liquid petroleum pipeline leak protection and detection in the province of Alberta. It's an industry document and not a government document. Over the weekend, one of his officials indicated that there are some 900 leaks of various kinds from pipelines in Alberta annually, most of which go unreported to the public. I'm certain the minister's had a chance to reflect on this over the weekend. I wonder if he'd indicate if he is satisfied that the pipeline regulations in Alberta fall entirely under industry regulation rather than government regulation.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know, I can tell the honourable member that in terms of spills of this magnitude in the last 5 years, there has been less than 10 spills of this magnitude. And, you know, we're obviously not here to justify the nature of the spill or the impact that it has. I point out to the honourable member that there is over 200,000 kilometres of pipelines in this province, and the monitoring mechanisms have essentially worked. However, there's no such thing as fail-safe because there is human error involved. There is human error involved in the construction and in the monitoring. The unfortunate aspect about the Rangeland pipeline, Mr. Speaker, that was one of the arteries that feeds into the Rangeland is the one that lesioned and created the spill. Amoco has had in process a mechanization program that is to be completed by the end of the year to phase out the manual monitoring of flow balances, and unfortunately this happened in the middle of this, so they certainly were taking responsibility for it. There is nothing related to this spill that I'm satisfied about, Mr. Speaker, and so I reject the preamble to the question.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't think we can dine out forever on the fact that we've been lucky in the past. Luck is one thing, but I think preparation is probably a little better. It's my understanding the minister has moved some direction. He's now in favor of automated measurement, automated shutdown, and that's a good thing. But there's another issue that's arisen. Some of the independent pipeline servicing companies provide a service where they run a pig through the line and they x-ray and look for danger spots in some of these aging pipeline systems throughout the province. And I wonder if the minister would confirm that the industry's recommended practice, the industry document that governs this industry, makes no mention of x-raying pipelines whatsoever. Will he undertake the responsibility himself to regulate the industry and look at the prospect of regulating or x-raying some of the aging pipeline in our province?
Mr. Speaker, we have an act, or at least a regulation, the pipeline regulation, and as the member indicated, under Section 6, subsection 3, it requires all new pipelines to conform to the CPA standard. Now, this is not unusual, Mr. Speaker, for the industry to set standards and then for monitoring and reporting. And certainly when you talk about 200,000 kilometers of pipelines in this province, you can't expect government to monitor and regulate every inch of that pipeline. You have to rely on the industry to do their own checks and balances. However, they must report results to the government, Mr. Speaker. And certainly in this case, we are not sure what the problem was at this particular point. All we know is that we have a pipeline leak. Once I've conducted my review, as I clearly indicated to the member for Rocky Mountain House, that we will be taking in the information and trying to determine what the problem was. I can undertake to the member, if the results of this investigation point to the fact that we need greater regulation, then I'll certainly give that full consideration. But I'm not going to jump to that conclusion yet, Mr. Speaker. I don't have all the evidence.
Edmonton Goldbar.
Mr. Speaker, many Albertans have expressed disappointment with the Premier's inability to secure commitment to the Triple E Senate in the recent Meech Lake discussions. I expect that disappointment is shared by the Premier. Albertans, I believe, Mr. Speaker, are not prepared to give up on all of the principles of Triple E. Now, with what is left to us in the current resolution, I think it's incumbent on Alberta, as one of the primary promoters of Triple E, to take initiatives immediately to develop our own agenda, to lead the process rather than just participate in it or follow it. My questions, Mr. Speaker, are to the Premier. What mechanisms does the Premier have in mind to develop precise proposals within the contemporary situation for effective Senate reform to meet the needs of Alberta and the West?
First, Mr. Speaker, I must say I'm astonished by the question from my honourable friend,
Particularly in light of the other
that she would say that Alberta was not leading in the matter of Senate reform. I think that is an astonishing conclusion for her to come to. After all, there was one government and one Premier who moved Senate reform from somewhere number 200 or something in constitutional matters to number one constitutional issue in Canada. I draw to her attention that there is because of Alberta's efforts, there's a new National Commission on Senate Reform that will be created, and we can debate and consider the ways in which we can influence that commission and gather a sense of all the views of Albertans. But remember, we are going to fundamentally change for all time the manner in which our Parliament operates. And let's do that thoughtfully and sensitively to make sure that it is done well.
Don, you got to listen to your good friend from Goldbar.
Mr. Speaker, what I'm asking here is that we get on with the process and that we, this time, that we do involve Albertans and get them to be part of it right away, because I don't think we have any time to lose here. Mr. Speaker, will the Premier then commit to public hearings and full discussions of Alberta's proposals prior to the First Minister's meeting on Senate reform? Can we get our own people involved, Mr. Premier, and now?
Again, I'm astonished by the question, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend knows that the Alberta legislature set up a special committee, all-party committee, that brought out the Triple E concept. I mean, it is there, and it's been endorsed by this legislature. So hardly should she now say, let's try and find out what we believe in terms of a Triple E Senate. After all, it's there. It was the legislative committee that brought it out, and I would tell the honourable member, my good friend, that surely she should update herself on that report. At least. And know what it was that we were voting on. I understand those who have centralist tendencies. But I want her to realize that the Senate reform we're looking for is one that no longer allows centralists to dominate this country.
Right, here, here. Calgary Bowl. Calgary Bowl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In view of the protest of the Native American groups of Montana with regards to the acquisition of the Shriver collection by the Provincial Museum, would the Minister of Culture and Multiculturalism please inform this Assembly as to whether the Blackfeet people of Alberta have been consulted about the purchase of this valuable collection of artifacts?
Mr. Speaker, on Thursday last, the Provincial Museum of Alberta opened to the public the Shriver collection of Blackfoot material. I must say a very impressive collection of artifacts and material from the Blackfoot culture. There was some suggestion at that time that somehow the government of Alberta, through the museum, had somehow breached a trust with the native people and that there was widespread unrest because of that. I must say, Mr. Speaker, at that opening ceremonies, at which I was a proud participant, that there was in attendance at that ceremony a number of elders of different Blackfoot bands, many tribal councilors, chiefs, former chiefs, and other representatives of Alberta natives. There was a sweetgrass ceremony that took place prior to the ribbon cutting, and there was a wide endorsation of the efforts of the museum and the government to preserve these most important relics and artifacts of native culture, not only for study in the museum context, but for study by native groups and those interested in native culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Minister, there, of course, have been many reports of unhappiness among the Blackfoot communities of Montana because of the sale of these artifacts. Could you please tell us what the legalities are of the challenge to the ownership of them?
Mr. Speaker, there have been some threats and some suggestions made by individuals in Montana, individuals who I must indicate do not have elected positions with bands, who have indicated that there may be challenges in the courts, challenges to the United Nations and elsewhere. But it should be pointed out, Mr. Speaker, that the artifacts in question had been owned for a period of some 75 years by an individual and his father in Browning, Montana. They were his personally, acquired as gifts or through purchase. He decided that because of the pressure of owning such valuable commodities that he wanted to dispose of these. He made a decision to sell them. He wanted them to go to an institution and not go into foreign hands and thus be lost forever. We dealt with this individual for many months, and we have now acquired them legally and paid money for them. The ownership is transferred from the gentleman in Montana to the ownership of the Provincial Museum of Alberta, and everything was completed in legal fashion, and I cannot perceive of where there could possibly be a legally based challenge to the ownership of these materials.
Request under Standing Order 30. Deputy Premier. Mr. Speaker, I would request and move that we adjourn the ordinary business of the Assembly to discuss a matter of urgent public importance, and I have indicated that written notice was given to your office, and the matter of urgent public discussion would be the subject of the accord and the final communique of the First Minister's meeting on the Constitution of June 9, 1990. The nature of this accord, of course, is important to all Albertans and all Canadians. It will form the basis for the future constitutional development of this country following the ratification of Meech Lake, in particular with respect to the future of Senate reform. And really, we believe that in this legislative assembly, it is important that our Premier and the other members of this assembly who are in attendance in Ottawa have an opportunity of informing Albertans and this assembly of the nature of the discussions. Therefore, I would move that this request be granted.
Sure. Under Standing Order 30 of the Assembly, indeed, the proper notification was given, and as far as the chair is concerned, the fulfillment of urgency is met. The chair therefore rules in favor of the motion and therefore puts the question, shall the debate on the urgent matter proceed? Those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. None registered. For purposes of the viewing audience and the general public, our standing orders state that every member who wishes to speak and is recognized by the chair is limited to 10 minutes only, and that naturally is going to somewhat limit some of the comments made. Honorable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to participate in this debate because we are talking about a very difficult, a very tense, emotional, and dangerous time for our country. And we were experiencing all of those feelings in our 6.5 days of meetings in Ottawa last week. I can describe those meetings. While there was only the First Ministers involved, I can describe them to the honourable members and to Albertans as a time of great emotion, a time of tears and joy, a time of anger, and a time of great concern for the future of our country. And all of those type of expressions were being made in the meetings themselves. And finally, I would say to my fellow First Ministers how much I appreciated the manner in which they participated in those meetings. Now, I also want to say to the Alberta delegation that supported me how much I appreciated their solid support. My colleagues in Cabinet, the Deputy Premier, Minister of Federal and Intergovernmental Affairs, and the longest-serving member of this legislature, our Minister of Municipal Affairs, who was very, very valuable. The two members of our cabinet, very, very valuable in helping and supporting me with our decisions and our participation in the meetings. I also want to say to the Leader of the Opposition and the Leader of the Liberal Party how much I appreciated them coming to Ottawa and for the time that they spent there participating in discussions of various natures to help the whole constitutional process succeed. I know from talking to them, and I knew it before, I guess, but I think our discussions down there merely confirmed it for me, that they are very strong Canadians. I should say, when I say that, just think of the difference in the province of Quebec. Because when the Premier of Quebec stands up and looks across the aisle, no broader than this, he looks at a leader of the opposition that is not a strong Canadian, that is working to dismantle and unravel this nation, and think of what that means in terms of the intensity of the debates, where a leader of the opposition there is using all of their wisdom and knowledge and political pressures they can to take the country apart. And I had that feeling as I was talking to the two leaders of opposition parties here, how great it was that they so clearly were strong Canadians. And I think that provides a better base for us to discuss this matter within our legislature. I want to say a word, too, about my caucus. It's impossible for you to go and be involved in that kind of intense discussion where there's 11 First Ministers all expressing the views and objectives of their province, or in case of the Prime Minister, the federal government. It's impossible to participate if you aren't there with the confidence and support of your caucus. And I felt at all times when I was in Ottawa representing Alberta that I had that confidence and support of my caucus, and I appreciate that very much. Now, I wanted to, just for a moment, confirm again the principles that Alberta went into this conference believing in. And that is, first, a united country. As we've always said, Canada can be a great country, but it will only be a great country, it will only reach its potential if it is united. and therefore it was the number one principle in my mind participating in those debates. Second, that we must have strong, equal provinces, unable to be dictated to from the center of our nation. And thirdly, that we wanted to make progress on meaningful Senate reform. And I want to look at the document as it measures up to those principles. Just before doing that, I want to say a word about the opposite result of the result that we have here, and the advice or the urging of some people in Alberta to me in our government, where some people say that they would have the Premier of Alberta break a commitment under Meech Lake, break a solemn agreement of the province of Alberta, dishonor a resolution of this assembly, unanimously passed, risk our nation, and for all time remove the possibility, at least in our lifetime, of meaningful Senate reform. If you consider that, break your word, break a commitment of our government, go against the unanimous resolution of this assembly, wipe out all chance of Senate reform, and put your nation at risk, and some would say that would make you a hero in Alberta. Think about that, Mr. Speaker, and who would urge the government to conduct themselves in that way in this province? Now, Mr. Speaker, I think we have to look at the accord which we have before us as it measures up to the principles that I've described. And we have the document, and I presented it to the House, and I hope every member is getting a copy as quickly as possible. Because this meeting, or these meetings, and it was described by one of my fellow First Ministers as the longest dinner meeting in history, since in each case we continue to extend it before going into the public conference. Mr. Speaker, this meeting was so important to the future of our country. And I'd like, first of all, to recall for members what Alberta received and achieved in Meech Lake itself, because that was really the purpose of this meeting, to have the premiers of New Brunswick, the Premier of Manitoba, and the Premier of Newfoundland, Labrador, agree to take that Meech Lake constitutional amendment to their legislatures and ask for ratification. Just let me touch briefly on the Meech Lake Accord and what it achieved for Alberta, because that is the base that we were going to work from. Now, I know it's not a perfect document. It has flaws, and when you bring together 11 First Ministers, obviously you have leaders of governments who have their own objectives, their own views of their province or the federal government. Therefore, how could it be a perfect document? How could you just dictate to other First Ministers? You don't. But remember what Meech Lake does provide to us. On an overall basis, Meech Lake gives the provinces a greater say, a greater influence on national decisions than ever before. Than ever before, Mr. Speaker. With Meech Lake, we would have, for the first time in history, a constitution made in Canada, agreed to by all the provinces in Canada. And it reverses the centralist directions that our country went in under the Trudeau-Lalonde years. Because what it does, it provides for the principle of equal provinces. It controls federal spending power in areas of exclusive provincial jurisdiction, where they had been moving. And that has stopped now because of the opting out clause. We have, for the first time, a major say on immigration. We have, for the first time, an input on Supreme Court decisions. We have for the first time a input on Senate appointments. Constitutional conferences are guaranteed. And in the first time in history, Alberta has the same as Ontario and Quebec, equal ability to have to agree, the veto. Never before has Alberta had that. So that's the Meech Lake Accord. Now, Mr. Speaker, I received a note saying that I have just about used up my time. And is that it? Would it be possible if the members might give me by... Could the members give me by unanimous consent a chance to go on into this a little bit?
The point of order takes precedence.
Crucial matter that I think that I would move, if that's the appropriate way of doing it, that the Premier be allowed an opportunity to take as long as he wants to state his position, along with the Leader of the Opposition, official Opposition, and the Leader of the Liberal Party.
Well, with due respect, honorable members, the chair tried to negotiate this earlier today and invited the House leaders to have a conversation in that regard. The message back was that everyone was supposed to stay to 10 minutes. Now, that's fine. Let us now then work out that the Honorable, the Premier, the Leader of the Opposition, and the Leader of the Liberal Party get 20 minutes each, and so that other members also have a chance to participate in debate. Now, if someone could I take that as being the substance of the motion from the leaders? Thank you very much. Those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carries unanimously. Honorable Premier. Thank you.
I'll go faster. Mr. Speaker, I had to establish the Meech Lake Accord because that's what the meeting was all about, to have it passed. And then, Mr. Speaker, I want to measure this document against our principles, the united country, strong equal provinces, and meaningful Senate reform. Well, by the Meech Lake Accord being brought to the legislatures of New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Labrador, and Manitoba, we do have, I believe, the basis for a united country where we are all together within the constitutional framework, and Quebec is welcomed in as equals within that constitutional family. Then, Mr. Speaker, in terms of Senate reform, the meaningful progress in Senate reform, if members will look with me actually it's the first page under the covering page in the area of Senate reform. For the first time in history, we will have a national commission on Senate reform set up with the provinces putting people on in equal numbers. You consider the importance of that, where we will have the best minds in Canada able to make recommendations on how our Senate reform will proceed. Now, if you remember, we've been able to convince 8 First Ministers that Triple E Senate is what we want. Therefore, what are their people who they have on this commission going to reflect? Obviously, it's going to be Triple E. So there is going to be a national commission working, made up preponderance of people believe in the Triple E, and making recommendations to, again, the first in history, a conference on Senate reform. Never had one before in the history of our country. It'll be held this year in British Columbia. And then, Mr. Speaker, the objectives that that commission must give effect to, and that the reform must give effect to. The Senate should be elected. That's never been agreed to by all governments in Canada ever before. A major breakthrough. The Senate should provide for more equitable representation of the less populous provinces and territories. And we've always said we want that. We think it should be done by equal members in the Senate. We're halfway there, perhaps, with more equitable, but we're not going to stop. We're going to work and make it equal. Then, Mr. Speaker, our third E, effective. And there it is. The Senate should have effective powers to ensure the interests of residents of the less populous provinces and territories figure more prominently in national decision-making. It's what we've been fighting for, and we've moved from just discussing Senate reform to the kind of objectives that will make meaningful Senate reform along the lines of the people of Alberta and Western Canada, and I believe of the Atlantic provinces. And I believe in the long run, all governments in Canada. Then, Mr. Speaker, as additional pressure to make sure that they aren't just discussions, the Prime Minister will report to the country every 6 months on the progress of Senate reform. And again, Alberta wanted reconfirmed, because there are other constitutional amendments proposed here, that Senate reform will be the key constitutional priority until that reform is achieved. That's stated, top of page 2. And then one more pressure point, and this is the one that if there isn't Senate reform achieved by 1995, that we will acquire more seats in the Senate. I hope that that doesn't happen. I hope we reform the Senate long before 1995. And so, Mr. Speaker, I believe we have set in place a process. We've set in place the objectives, and we have it agreed to by all governments, hopefully by June 23rd, that we will have made a major move to reform one of the houses of our Parliament and change forever, in a fundamental way, the way the government will operate in Canada. Mr. Speaker, we go on to deal with the matter of equality of rights, sex equality rights, the role of the territories, language issues, Aboriginal issues, how new provinces are created, a Canada clause, and how it will be drafted, confirming that the process must be changed, considering the mandatory hearings, review the 3-year time limit. We then go on to the matter of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, ensuring that it operates the way we intended. And Mr. Speaker, finally, that we had an opinion from the best legal minds in Canada that, in fact, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is not in any way impinged on or derogated from by the Distinct Society Clause. And then there was an amendment for the province of British Columbia. So, Mr. Speaker, I think you can see that we went into this conference with the principles I've mentioned, and I believe we have met those principles. And I think it is a major step forward for Alberta. The benefits of Meech Lake, the new moves forward on Senate reform that so fast, that has moved so fast from just several years ago, where one premier and one government set out on a kind of lonely journey trying to convince other Canadians and other governments about the importance of Senate reform, and look what we've been able to achieve. Now, quickly, a word, Mr. Speaker, on the matter of Mr. Waters, and Alberta's elected appointee. On Thursday, I had a meeting arranged with the Prime Minister, and we discussed Mr. Waters. I've obviously raised the issue with him many times. It just turned out on Thursday that it was one of the darkest moments for this agreement. And I wanted to make sure that whether or not this agreement progressed, I wanted to ensure that whatever the outcome, failure or otherwise, Mr. Waters would be appointed. The Prime Minister said to me, is that the opinion and is that the position of the Premier of Alberta? And I said, yes. We have Mr. Waters here. We set up the Senatorial Selection Act to keep pressure on the process. And so I'm pleased to say, Mr. Speaker, that this afternoon, His Excellency, the Governor General, has appointed Charles Stanley Waters. Has appointed Charles Stanley Waters to the Senate of Canada. And Mr. Speaker, we're very pleased with that. It was the direction of this government, and I trust that Mr. Waters will represent the people of our province well. I want to say one other thing that I told the Prime Minister and my fellow First Ministers, because they asked me about the future. And they said that they felt while the Senate reform process was going on, would we consider that we do not all move as First Ministers in a holus bolus way with additional elections of senators? I only made this commitment. I said, I will watch the Senate reform process, and we will see if it works as intended. And only if it works as intended will we consider whether or not we may or may not proceed with additional senatorial selection acts. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm extremely pleased that we have been able to have this appointment. It was the result of the people of Alberta selecting it in a free and democratic way. And I think when you put that, by the way, I should say clearly, it was not a condition of this agreement. Absolutely not. It was a matter of fact confirmed right at the darkest day, if you like, of this agreement. And so, Mr. Speaker, I urge all honorable members to look at this document, consider it in regard with the principles that we went to Ottawa to achieve, and I think they will find that, in fact, with the backing of my ministers, our delegation, and my caucus, we were able to achieve, and with the help of the Leader of the Opposition, and I mean that, help, and very, very strong help, and the Leader of the Liberal Party, help and strong help as well, we were able to achieve this for Alberta.
Leader of the Opposition.
Well, let me, first of all, Mr. Speaker, thank the Premier for, well, I'm not sure if I should thank him or not after spending a week in Ottawa, but for participating. It was certainly, to say the least, interesting, frustrating, and a lot of other experiences that we had in Ottawa. And I'm not sure who I send the bill over for the 3 shirts that I had to pick up, Mr. Speaker, but I will try to find somebody to pay for it. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to first of all, I don't think it will surprise people, talk about the process and go back in history, Mr. Speaker, and then I'll talk, if I can, briefly about what we ended up with. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, like every other document, I think people could look at this and say there's some good things in it and there's some bad things in it, Mr. Speaker. I think that was true when we go back to '87, where the original Meech Lake Accord came up. Now, the problem, Mr. Speaker, that I see is that that particular process at that time left an extremely bad taste in people's mouths, because all people saw, and I know there was work behind the scenes with the First Ministers, and I know it started off in Edmonton, that the prime reason for constitutional deadlock at that time, or constitutional talks, would be to bring Quebec in so we could be a whole country again in terms of the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. And I know that a lot of work went on behind the scenes at that particular time. But, Mr. Speaker, what it must look like, if you go back in '87, all of a sudden you have 11 men, I think at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, signing a document, Mr. Speaker. And from out of that document, saying to the people of Canada, Mr. Speaker, that not one dotted I or not one crossed T can be changed, Mr. Speaker. This document is final. And in some cases, people holding public hearings, in some cases not. Trying to get the government here to hold public hearings because I knew that there was a fair amount of interest among the public, and I knew, Mr. Speaker, that a lot of people didn't understand what was in the Constitution, one way or the other. In many cases, people were getting mixed up with the last Constitution. The notwithstanding clause I would hear, for example, is a criticism, and that was part of the last Constitution, Mr. Speaker. So we had a problem. And the problem started to get worse. You could feel the ripples throughout this province and throughout the country, Mr. Speaker, of people being anti-Meech. It started off, people were glad to have Quebec in, and the polls would indicate that people were generally in favor of Meech Lake. The longer it went on, Mr. Speaker, and the more people talked about it, the more angry they became, and we know the polls started to turn around. I'm not sure for whatever reason in Meech, everybody found a different reason to hate it. That's what often happens in constitutional talks. Everybody finds some other reason why they don't like that particular document. Then, Mr. Speaker, we had new governments come in. 3 new premiers, Mr. Speaker, that fought the elections. Well, I'm not sure of Mr. Philman, but certainly some people fought the elections in Manitoba against Meech Lake. Certainly that was the case in Newfoundland, Labrador. It certainly was the case in New Brunswick. So with the 3-year deadline, you have a new problem, Mr. Speaker. And these people that got elected, and I think rightfully so, said we cannot accept it. We want to be part of these constitutional deadlocks. There have to be some changes in Meech Lake. Now, Mr. Speaker, I dare say if we'd gone back in the process and we said this is a document that we think we've done a pretty good job here, maybe it's not perfect, Mr. Speaker, maybe it's not perfect, but maybe we can make some changes. Now we're going to hold public hearings across the country, both nationally and provincially, and let's take a look at it. We're going to explain it because we think it makes a lot of sense, and maybe there are some things that we could do different. Then I expect we wouldn't have had these 3 premiers, that they would have had a note. And I would have suggested to, and this is a criticism of the Prime Minister, not here, that knowing that the game had changed then when you had 3 new premiers, that the process we went through last week at the last minute should have been done a year or 2 before, Mr. Speaker. A year or 2 before. And you might have solved some of the problems. But, Mr. Speaker, we went along. Last moment, we were wondering what's going to happen. It became clear that at least Manitoba and Newfoundland, and wasn't sure about New Brunswick, but it looked like there was some movement there, that as the day drew closer, June the 23rd, Manitoba has to have public hearings, Mr. Speaker, that it looked like Meech was dead. So the first ministers, including, and I think it was the right thing to do, is to bring the ministers together and talk about it, even at the late date. I think the Premier here did the same thing, is that finally we get a meeting. Now, when we went down there, I don't know what people here expected. I'll tell you, I was certainly surprised by spending a week in Ottawa. But I thought maybe they'd have their meeting and go public and that would be it, or they'd get an agreement and be back Tuesday. But we got into a marathon, Mr. Speaker. And I have to congratulate the Premier, at least on the stamina. I'm not sure about his common sense sitting there for that week. But Mr. Speaker, and then the point I want to make about this, and this is Brian Mulroney's style. He's very good at it. He used to be a labor negotiator. He worked for management. I understand he was excellent at it. It's politics by exhaustion, Mr. Speaker. We get them in, my colleague Gary Dewar has called the Stockholm Syndrome, where the captives start to like the people that have got them captured, Mr. Speaker. If you keep people there long enough, eventually you hope that you're going to get an agreement. Now, Mr. Speaker, maybe people would argue that's the only thing you could do at that particular time, Mr. Speaker. But the reality is he could have done this much sooner when the pressures weren't there and made the process much more public. So, Mr. Speaker, imagine again you're the Canadian public. I was sitting in Ottawa, seeing this go in, admiring the stamina of the First Ministers, knowing how hard that must be, but we're dealing with the Constitution of the country. What does it look like in Edmonton? What does it look like in Calgary? What does it look like in Delia? What does it look like across the country? Mr. Speaker, again, it looks like they're making the same process problems again. 11 men behind closed doors. And so the process, even the product that people come out with, because the process is flawed, people are going to be angry. And they are angry, Mr. Speaker. And I'm not sure why, in many cases, the phone calls I get, some of it, unfortunately, is intolerant. And that's unfortunate. I think the process has increased that in the country. But some of it, again, they're just not sure. As I said in question period, I think the sign that summed it up best for Canadians was going in the First Minister with a person had a sign. I'm confused. I'm confused. And so now we have a problem, Mr. Speaker. The process, we could argue, has got 10 of the First Ministers on board, but I still don't know what's going to happen, Mr. Speaker, because Mr. Wells has gone back to Newfoundland to a hero's welcome, and indicates now, I understand as late as today, that it's not going to be a referendum, but it's going to be a free vote in the House. And knowing how popular he is in the House, I just wonder what's going to happen, Mr. Speaker. So the process, even this latest process, may have been self-defeating. You know, the idea of brinkmanship politics, pressure, 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 you're wrecking the country, and all the rest of it, Mr. Speaker. So I really do suggest that this process has been so bad that if there's anything that comes out of this, again, hopefully never again we will deal with our Constitution in this matter. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to just take a look at what was done this week beyond Meech Lake. As the legislature should be aware, that we wanted some amendments, Mr. Speaker, and again, this is a frustration for us. There were some things in Meech Lake that I thought were important. Certainly bringing Quebec into the Constitution has to be important. And for those people that think that they can go along without Quebec and have the same standard of living, the same benefits that you have now with the country splintering up, they better think again, Mr. Speaker, because this country will be in serious difficulty if we lose Quebec, and it will happen right across the country. But, Mr. Speaker, we brought in a number of amendments. They were all defeated. I've never got many amendments passed in the legislature, so it didn't surprise me, Mr. Speaker. But I think there were some good ones there. I think now, obviously, the Premier must agree with me, Mr. Speaker, because some of the amendments that we talked about, some important agendas that we had, Mr. Speaker, are now going to come up in round 2. And this is one of the reasons, and as the Premier is well aware, I've talked to many of our party people, and certainly Gary Dewar was a player there, spent a lot of time with him. It's not what we wanted. We wanted amendments to Meech right now, Mr. Speaker, but we did get some things that we raised in this legislature, Mr. Speaker, that are extremely important for our party. If you look, the further constitutional amendments are going to be the Charter, sex equality rights, Mr. Speaker, that we talked about as an amendment. It's going to come about. Another amendment that we brought in had to do with the role of the territories, the Yukon and the Northwest Territories. They are now going to have appointments to the Senate, the Supreme Court. Mr. Speaker, we talked about Aboriginal, the process dealing with Aboriginal rights, and one of our amendments, that's coming about, Mr. Speaker. And one of the other major things that we talked about was the creation of new provinces in the territories. If the Senate reforms on the top of the agenda, the Premier would also agree that the creation of new provinces in the territories, in fairness to the North, is on the top. We also raised, Mr. Speaker, to bring into the Constitution and what Canada was about, besides a distinct society, dealing with women, dealing with Aboriginal rights, and dealing with multiculturalism. I'm pleased to say that the new Canada Clause is going to hold public hearings to look at that, Mr. Speaker. So,
passes an order, it's not an option whether the material is to be provided or not. And whether the material continues to be housed in the files of Stanley Associates or Clone Lenor Limited is not particularly relevant. This is an order of the House, and it is a document, it is a report, as acknowledged in the material filed by the Minister, and it was prepared at public expense. So I'm speaking not simply of the public interest, but the fact that there's an order of the Assembly which is not presently complied for and is therefore a breach of privilege.
Minister, Public Works, Supply and Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Today, the member from Jasper Place has made some comments with respect to a purported matter of privilege, but as I recall, he did not cite any quotations from any of the rules associated with the House to verify, in fact, a matter of privilege with respect to this matter. Mr. Speaker, as well, I want to point out at the outset that in a handwritten note dated March the 8th of 1990, in a handwritten note to the Speaker, the member wrote, and I quote, "The Assembly's order has not been complied with," end quote. And further, and I quote, "I refer as well to the attached excerpt from the review of Greggs and Associates report, June 89, which refers at page 64 to a report prepared for this project," end quote. Mr. Speaker, when this motion for return was accepted, a great deal of research was expended searching for, and I quote, "a copy of the report on the survey on photolineation in the Oldman River region," end quote, prepared by J.D. Millard. I was assured then that the government of Alberta was unaware of such a report titled, and I quote again, "Survey on photolineation in the Oldman River region," end quote. That assurance was provided by the consultants employed in the Oldman River Dam project, namely UMA Engineering Limited in association with Acres International, with Stanley Associates Engineering, with Clone Leonoff, and was verified to me by my Deputy Minister, Mr. Ed McClellan, my Assistant Deputy Minister, Mr. Dan Bader, and my Executive Director of Reservoir Development, Mr. Jake Thiessen. Upon that review and verification, the response to motion return 201 was filed with the Legislative Assembly on August 16, 1989, and it was filed as sessional paper number 20189, Mr. Speaker. The response was a clear one and a specific one, and I quote from the response that was filed. "The information provided to the Department regarding Dr. Millard's findings is summarized in the review of Greggs and Associates report, June 1989, which was previously tabled," end quote. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to emphasize the words, and I quote again, "which was previously tabled," end quote. The response filed on August 16, 1989 goes on, and I quote, "Dr. Millard has not prepared a specific report for the Department on photolineation in the Oldman River region."
Speaker, again, when we're trying to translate Statistics Canada's number into actual jobs, we do have somewhat of a problem, and it's a subject of debate on motions for return. But to the best of my knowledge, from February to March, there was an additional 18,000 people working in the province of Alberta. In Calgary, an additional 9,900, and in Edmonton, additional 8,700. I would also like to note that 12,000 of the 18,000 jobs created during that period, Mr. Speaker, occurred in the service-producing side of the economy.
Edmonton Belmont. That in the capital city region, unemployment is up 1,000 over last month and 6,000 over last year. And that with 57,000 people unemployed in the city of Edmonton, or in the capital region, which is 14,000 more than in the Calgary region, has the minister, aside from prayers and Tory patronage, any plans or programs that will specifically address the unemployment crisis in the capital city region?
Mr. Speaker, again, the honourable member may be using statistics that are different than the ones that I'm using. In the Edmonton area, there was a drop in the rate of unemployment. Now, again, as the member for Edmonton Belmont recognizes, the rate of unemployment in Edmonton and throughout this province is too high. I guess I could ask my colleague, the Minister of Economic Development and Trade, to enunciate some of the 56 initiatives in his department that will address job creation in this province. With respect to I think there's renewed optimism in the energy sector, Mr. Speaker, and I think that the dramatic drop in Calgary in the rate of unemployment is a reflection of the federal government's initiatives and this government's initiatives. I believe that the ripple effect will take hold throughout the province, including the capital city region.
Supplementary, Calgary Buffalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since the minister well knows that retail sales in January collapsed very dramatically in this province, and since the budget is taking $1.6 billion out of the economy, and since the Olympic spending will soon end, this means trouble. Is the minister going to revise his employment plan, which really at the present time means shuffling money from one pocket to another, and do something which really meaningfully tackles the unemployment problem in this province?
Mr. Speaker, I did indicate to the members of the Assembly just a moment ago that 12,000 of the 18,000 jobs in the last month came in the service-producing side, which to a large extent is in the retail sales, wholesale sales area of the economy. Alberta has traditionally been the highest per capita retail sales in the country. We did dip below Ontario for a brief period of time, and I understand that we are now back to being the highest in per capita sales. So I would say that the confidence is there is an underlying confidence in the economy. I do not want to exude confidence at this particular time, Mr. Speaker, but I think it's important that we do recognize the trend, and I, for one, am encouraged by that trend.
The member for Vegreville, followed by the member for Calgary Buffalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Technology, Research and Telecommunications, and it concerns rural telephone service. Even with the proposed expansion of the extended flat-rate calling system, there are still many rural Albertans who, for economic, social, or family reasons, feel that they're not on the right telephone exchange. They live near the boundary and have to make frequent long-distance calls to neighboring exchanges. I'm wondering what consideration the Minister has given to providing Albertans so affected a one-time opportunity to move their phone or transfer their phone from one exchange to another.
Mr. Speaker, the member for Vegreville raises the question of the exchange boundaries, and my research into that matter suggests that many of these boundaries originated with the old mutual telephone systems. And what we are faced with now is, as has been pointed out, and many of my colleagues from all over the province have pointed it out to me, they do so almost on a daily basis, Mr. Speaker, the fact that some of these exchanges do not recognize municipal boundaries and are not convenient from that point of view, nor are they necessarily convenient from a hospital contact point of view or a school jurisdiction point of view. The modernization, in short, the adoption of digital switching equipment will, Mr. Speaker, we believe, enable us to start examining the possibility of modifying those boundaries without undue cost in the future. Mr. Speaker, I think, however, that it will not be possible to engage in that on a major way for 5 or 6 years. But I do have hope that the adoption of digital equipment will enable us to make some changes in about that time frame.
You're welcome. Supplementary question. The $18 million allocated in this year's budget to the rural individual line program is somewhat less than expected, and I'm wondering, does this mean that it'll take longer than the original 5-year projected to supply individual lines to all rural Albertans?
Mr. Speaker, that's clearly a question which could lead to some debate in estimates, but briefly, that will, of course, turn on the cost of the program, the availability of resources later on. So the answer at this point is one of uncertainty, but it is my goal to meet the commitments which were made, and I think it's possible to do that.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, if only 2 or 3 people on a given party line decide to pay the fee and get the individual line, will the remaining subscribers be forced to pay to get that line, or will they get the service by default, essentially having a party line all to themselves?
Mr. Speaker, that's a question which, of course, is hypothetical in the sense that we haven't yet had to deal with it. Also, Mr. Speaker, it is a question which is partially within the jurisdiction of the Public Utilities Board, or controlled by the Public Utilities Board, and that hearing is going on, I believe, today. That's my understanding without checking, but certainly this week the Public Utilities Board has been hearing the sets of conditions and tariffs which would apply.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, in the time it takes to bring all of the exchanges into this program, has the minister considered any ways that we could limit the number of people on any given party line to 2?
Mr. Speaker, our current party line application or use is a maximum of 4 per party line. Where commercial entities are on those party lines, we have tried to make adjustments as they've been brought to the attention of either Alberta government telephones or to myself. In most areas, in fact, where party lines are in use, as I understand from our reviews, most jurisdictions, if not all, have allowed for more than 4 attachments per line. So ours is the lowest, in fact, where party lines are in use.
Westlock Sturgeon, followed by Stetler.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the minister and back to the original part on tolls. We've abolished tolls for highways because they didn't make sense. We've got toll-free dialing and phones in the metropolitan areas. When is the minister going to abolish tolls for phone calls within the province of Alberta so the rural will be equal to the urban?
Mr. Speaker, there has to be some system of paying for the provision of telephone services, and the question being raised focuses on whether or not there should be some element of user pay. Mr. Speaker, with the tremendous advances that have occurred in technology and the significance of communications, it is possible that some subscribers would use the telephone very little, and others, in fact, could use it for many hours in a day. And we have to address that kind of question, along with who pays for the system. Telephone and telephone service will not be free, and we'll have to work out a tariff structure which I think is fair to all, and which also requires those who use it most to pay the most.
Member for Stettler.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, certainly there's an acknowledgement that the extended flat rate calling is popular on a provincial basis, but it is a basic violation of the user pay principle. I'm wondering in that regard if the Minister is considering requiring full disclosure of all flat rate charges on AGT billings.
Mr. Speaker, that again relates to the user pay concept, or at least users being aware of what they are being charged for, and it has been a matter of discussion. No decision has yet been completed on it, although it does show on some bills.
Member for Calgary-Buffalo, followed by the member for Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, this is to the Premier. Yesterday, the Minister of Energy indicated that he was satisfied with the current situation in which Albertans pay 5 cents per litre more for gasoline after taking taxes into account than do consumers in Ontario. This week, the Nova Scotia Public Utilities Board ordered that their prices be rolled back by 2 cents a litre in light of overpricing there. What explanation can the Premier give to the people of Alberta as to why we should be paying 5 cents per litre more for gasoline in Alberta in light of the fact that the oil fields are at our doorstep and are thousands of miles from Ontario?
Mr. Speaker, first, leading up to the question was incorrect. Again, as mentioned by the Honourable Minister of Energy yesterday, Albertans pay the lowest price for gasoline in Canada, and that's been confirmed by reviews, polls, surveys, or anything else you want to take. Also, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member, great supporter of that wonderful Crown Corporation of Petrocan. I'm sure they wouldn't do anything terrible like that.
Well, we saw recently that the Premier thought that drilling was up during the first quarter of this year over last year, and it wasn't so, and the same pertains with respect to the price of the raw product of gasoline, Mr. Speaker. The question is, what has the government been doing to explore ways of ensuring that the gasoline markets in Alberta are competitive at this time?
Mr. Speaker, to make sure that we have an enthusiastic and healthy free enterprise system.
That's it. Subsidized by consumers. Subsidized by consumers.
It appears, Mr. Speaker, that the Premier is totally happy with the situation of paying 5 cents more for gasoline. What explanation does the Premier have as to why gasoline prices seem to come down so slowly when oil prices are falling, yet move up so quickly when the prices rise?
Again, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member is incorrect. Sometimes they move up more quickly, sometimes they drop more quickly.
Mr. Speaker, is the Premier going to totally abdicate the situation of competition in this particular issue, or will he instruct his ministers to take some steps to ensure that Alberta consumers get the benefits of fair competition in the sale of gasoline in this province?
Mr. Speaker, we certainly are, and it's by having a healthy free enterprise system. It works in Alberta. It would not work under any kind of thinking as presented by the Honourable Member or his socialist-leaning party or the socialists themselves. And I might point out it's unique and ironic, Mr. Speaker, he's raising the question today when competition is driving the price of gasoline down to all-time lows in Alberta, where farmers are lining up in huge lineups to get it. If you had some kind of competitive control, that control would be the bottom. It would never go below that. It's obvious, Mr. Speaker, they don't understand the marketplace. I understand that because they only believe in socialism over there, those two parties.
It's irregular for the next thing that was about to occur. Member for Wainwright, followed by the member for Edmonton Centre, if there's time.
My question is to the Minister of Agriculture, and it's concerning the price war on, with the oil companies on the farm fuels that has resulted in diesel fuel selling as low as 3 cents per liter and gasoline as low as 5 cents per liter. And given the member, excuse me, given the member from the West Loch Sturgeon area constituency yesterday asked the government to launch a public inquiry into the pricing of gasoline to stop the gouging the public. Has your department had a chance to evaluate the direct financial benefit that has been given to the agriculture industry?
Mr. Speaker, we have been monitoring the situation, and as our Premier indicated, we are delighted that the farming population can take advantage of this significant savings. Quite frankly, I wouldn't be out of order by sharing with the House. It would be my hope that this tradition would be more widespread throughout the province of Alberta, because we in this party want to do everything we possibly can to help the agricultural sector.
Supplementary then, is this price war province-wide?
Mr. Speaker, to date it has been rather spotty, but it's my understanding that an individual farmer from any part of the province can go to another part of the province to order his fuels. And as I indicated earlier, we would be hopeful too that it would become a little more widespread within our province.
Supplementary then, did your department have any interference with this fuel price, or did the oil companies feel sorry for the agriculture industry and give us a little benefit?
Mr. Speaker, our department didn't have any direct bearing in it whatsoever.
Member for West Loch Sturgeon, followed by the member for Vegreville. Supplementaries.
Here's supplementary to the Minister of Agriculture. In order that all farmers, and just not the rich ones, can benefit from this temporary price war, would the Minister of Agriculture, I hear rumbling in the cages, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Agriculture, would he consider and view the fact that it costs $2,000 to $4,000 to buy the tanks to store the gasoline take advantage of before the tax rate goes up? Will he consider loaning those farmers that can't afford it right now the money to buy the steel tanks so that they can store the gasoline before it comes up?
You should have quit while you were ahead. Mr. Speaker, that's the type of ad hocery we hear on a regular basis from the Liberal Party. We bring forward policies and programs that work on a consistent basis for the entire credit needs of the agricultural sector, such as a Farm Credit Stability Program, which all farmers can access, and we're not about to get involved in the ad hocery program such as the Liberal member has suggested.
Vegreville, supplementary.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. I'm just wondering, recognizing that businesses in the long term don't like to sell at a loss or lose money, has the Minister's Department decided to do any investigation to determine whether or not fuel prices charged over the last 10 months were unreasonably high in such a way that enables them to sell them at a much reduced rate to farmers now?
Mr. Speaker, our department not only monitors fuel prices, but we also monitor fertilizer prices and chemical prices, and we have found that there hasn't been any undue distortions in the market. But as the Liberal chap from Calgary inquired earlier, as is the honourable member from Vegreville, if they are aware of any irregularities, I would think it would be incumbent upon them to make us aware of that and bring it to the appropriate authorities so that we could take action in the event that it was required.
Time for question period has expired. The chair has a request, an unusual request, but a request from a member, the member for Athabasca Lac-La-Biche, requesting unanimous consent of the Assembly to deliver a brief statement to the House. Does the Assembly agree? Opposed? Honourable Member Athabasca Lac-La-Biche.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to deal with three separate questions. First, the matter of the alleged reflection on the office of the Speaker. Second, the question of the alleged breach of privilege arising from the release of a publication of the House. And third, the procedure involved in...
Honourable member, they were decisions of the chair, they were points of privilege, and the ruling was made. Please continue, but without the word alleged.
First, concerning the reflection on the office of the Speaker. Reference was made to the third paragraph of my letter to you of the 8th of April, which I caused to be delivered to you in response to your request that I follow Standing Order 15, subsection 2, and state my question of privilege. In stating what I consider to be the breach of privilege, I did, of course, have to state what I believe to be an error in your ruling. So I find it very difficult to accept that any breach of Beauchesne Citation 52, subsection 1, could have occurred. It would have been impossible for me to state my point of privilege without noting where I believe your ruling to be an error. But if I went beyond what was necessary in stating my objection, and with respect, I do not believe I did, nonetheless, I would apologize. As to the question of publication, here again, I must, with the greatest respect, express the surprise I feel at my letter to you being considered a publication of the House, as are, for example, the Alberta Hansard, the votes and proceedings, and the journals. Beauchesne Citation 41, subsection 1, and following to my mind makes it very clear that the words published and publications are words used in Beauchesne in their ordinary sense, so that my letter to you setting out the question of privilege was my publication and not a publication of the House. The copy of my letter to you, which I kept, was mine to do with as I liked. In giving copies to interested reporters, the matters already being in the public eye, I believe I was acting reasonably and no disrespect of anyone was intended. However, if in any way that may reasonably be construed as disrespectful of the privileges and courtesies of this House, in that event I would apologize. Finally, as to the matter of the procedures involved in resolving a question of breach of privilege, I once more must respectfully draw to your attention a considerable difficulty. You have yourself decided the question of breach of privilege with regard to the release of an alleged publication of the House, instead of confining your ruling to the prima facie...
Honourable member, the chair has shown extreme latitude with this statement. Is there to be a conclusion to this? The member is in danger once again of breaching privilege. Is there a conclusion? The member is indeed. Please, the conclusion.
Further, a remedy was then prescribed by you without any preceding motion. Beyond that...
Thank you, honourable member. Is this the conclusion of the statement for the second time of asking?
So
without order, please, honourable member. Please, the chair, with great hesitancy and with the greatest of respect, is trying to adhere to the proprieties, the customs and uses of this House. The member is also bound by the same customs of the chamber. Would the member please act in appropriate fashion?
Okay. Okay, I hope I have explained this difficulty sufficiently that you will be able now to accept what I have said as sufficient to meet the case. And I have